Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you greetings from the Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute in Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh, India. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting, particularly Professor Kashif Malik, Professor Javed Farooqi, Professor Altaf Alam, and Professor Bushra Ali for giving me the opportunity to speak at this important meeting. I've been asked to speak on the topic of hepatitis E virus, all you need to know. I wish the organizers had been equally generous with the time that they're allotted to me, but nevertheless, in the next 20 minutes or so, I will try and take you through as much of the topic as time will allow. First, briefly about the history and the geography of this virus. To trace some of the key events in the history of this virus, in modern times, the first major outbreak of infectious hepatitis is the one that was reported from New Delhi in 1955-56 and was found to be not hepatitis A or B. However, the seminal work on identifying enterically transmitted non-A, non-B hepatitis as a new virus was done by Professor M.S. Khuru during the Kashmir Valley epidemic in 1978, who also noted the high mortality in pregnant women. M.S. Balayan et al. In 1983, 2 years before similar work was done by Barry Marshall for Helicobacter pylori, actually ingested a suspension prepared from the stool of patients infected with this enterically transmitted virus, developed an acute hepatitis, and identified virus-like proteins from his own stool during the Afghanistan epidemic. Subsequently, sequencing of the viral RNA genome reported in 1990 led to an explosive growth in the field of hepatitis E virus research, including the development of HEV genotyping in 2006, initially 4, and now 8 genotypes have been described. The first vaccine was reported in NEJM in 2007, while in Lancet 2010, the phase 3 trial of Hecolin, which became the only approved drug in the world, was reported. And in between, in 2008, Nisim Kamar and co-workers reported the occurrence of chronic hepatitis E virus infection with genotype 3 infection. There are many, many more important landmarks, but for the want of time, I have confined myself to these. Now, looking at the global distribution of hepatitis E virus, the regions shown in blue are hyperendemic for this virus. Those shown in red are low endemicity areas, and green areas are reported as non-endemic for the virus. These roughly coincide with genotype 1 and 2 distribution in hyperendemic and genotype 3 and 4 distribution in low endemic areas. In hyperendemic areas, large epidemics from time to time have been reported, including the important epidemics I have listed in this box, the largest one being from China. In 1991, at our own institute, we investigated the outbreak in Kanpur affecting roughly 79,000 individuals. This cartoon shows you the numerous other smaller epidemics that have been reported, as you will see, mainly from northern India, north of the Vindhyas. And overall, the global burden is of roughly 20 million infections per year of acute hepatitis E infection, 3.5 million of which are icteric, resulting in about 70,000 deaths and 3,000 stillbirths, with 1/3 of the world's population having a lifetime risk of developing this infection, which may be as high as 60% in endemic areas. Now, coming to the structure and the genome of the virus that was first discovered in 1978 and identified in, say, 1983. This is the immune electron microscopy pictograph showing you what the virus looked like under the electron microscope. Diagrammatically, it is being seen as a 72 kilobase positive single-stranded RNA, which is quasi-enveloped, and the RNA is contained in an icosahedral capsid. It has 3 open reading frames. Open reading frame 1, ORF1, which contains 70% of the genome, codes for 5 enzymes and other important regions. ORF2 codes for the capsid protein, which secreted as monomers, eventually forms decamers that assemble in virus-like proteins without the capsid, and the full HEV virion enclosing the capsid and the RNA. The capsid protein binds to target receptors to infect cells, is the target for the immune response to HEV, and also serves as the basis for development of candidate vaccines, all of which are ORF2 based. ORF3 is codes for viroporin, which is important for viral egress from the human cell, while ORF4 is generally reported only in genotype 1. Some clinical and epidemiologic features: over 90% of infections with hepatitis E virus are asymptomatic, while fewer than 10% result in overt hepatitis B, while extrahepatic manifestations can be seen both with asymptomatic and overt infections. Fewer than 1% develop a complicated course with liver failure, acute liver failure, or acute chronic liver failure, mainly with genotype 1, while chronic hepatitis E and extrahepatic manifestations are mainly seen with genotype 3 and 4. Events during the acute infection with the hepatitis E virus genotype 1 are shown in this cartoon. After an incubation period of about 3 weeks, there is a prodromal illness of roughly a 1 week duration, followed by an icteric phase of about 4 weeks and a convalescent phase of about 7 to 8 weeks. The first biomarker to appear in the serum is HEV RNA. Viremia is short, lasting only about 3 weeks or so. Simultaneously with the appearance of the prodrome, IgM anti-HEV as well as ALT elevation is noted. While ALT comes down more rapidly, the course of IgM anti-HEV decline is slower, and IgG anti-HEV, which appears later around the 4th weeks, is long-lasting. Now, coming to some clinical features of different HEV genotypes. Genotype 1, we have already talked about its geographical distribution. Genotype 1 is transmitted mainly by contaminated drinking water. There is no zoonosis or animal reservoir for this infection. It is the most common cause of sporadic hepatitis, the cause of outbreaks in epidemic hepatitis, and fulminant hepatitis develops in 20 to 30% of women pregnant women who are infected with this virus. Genotype 2 shares similar characteristics, although it is less well studied. Genotype 3, we've already discussed, is mainly seen in industrialized nations. It is a foodborne zoonosis, mainly transmitted through inadequately cooked pork, as well as other food items, shellfish, strawberries, vegetables, also through blood transfusions. It is responsible for chronic hepatitis E virus infection in proportion of patients with immunosuppression, frequently develops neurologic symptoms like neuralgic amyotrophy. While genotype 4 has similar routes of transmission, it seldom develops chronic hepatitis. There is no clear evidence of neurologic involvement, but interestingly, it is associated with preterm births, abortions, and is associated with male infertility. The other 4 genotypes have been recently reported in small numbers. The animal reservoir is the wild boar in Japan. In the Middle East, it is the camel, both the dromedary and the Bactrian camels. And their detailed clinical profile and significance is still under evaluation. Now, coming to an important feature of hepatitis E virus genotype 1, that is its course during pregnancy. Higher rates of infection during pregnancy have been reported mainly for genotype 1 and 2, with only a few cases for genotype 3 and 4. Higher rates of infection in pregnant women compared to non-pregnant and women and men have mainly been reported from northern India and also from several other African countries, but not from Egypt. An important paper that came out in 2006 suggests that this may be because of the high seroprevalence of anti-HEV by the age of 15. Just like HAV in India, HEV has a 90% seroprevalence in Egypt, whereas the maximum seroprevalence reported from Indian studies has not crossed 40% and is even lower in the juvenile age group, which may account for the higher infection rates in young women when they become pregnant. The conditions in pregnancy I'll talk to about, which predispose to infection, I'll talk to about very shortly. However, once acute hepatitis develops, the frequency and severity of fulminant hepatic failure is similar in pregnant and non-pregnant women. Management is conservative, and hitherto no evidence suggests that termination of pregnancy in acute liver failure decreases maternal risk. Here I've summarized some important studies in which the infection rates and the rates of fulminant hepatic failure and death are documented in HEV genotype 1 infection. The seminal study from Kashmir showed a 17.3% infection rate and a 22.2% mortality due to fulminant hepatic failure in pregnant women. Similar numbers are reported from other parts of India. However, the retrospective analysis of the study data sera stored in the Delhi epidemic were not as instructive. These two series from Africa show similar high attack rate in pregnant women, as well as high fulminant hepatic failure rates during pregnancy. There are many other similar studies which follow the same pattern, that the attack rates are 3 to 5 times higher during pregnancy than in non-pregnant women or men, and fulminant failure development as well as deaths up to the tune of 20 to 30% are 3 to 7 times higher in pregnant women. Now, what are the mechanisms underlying severe liver injury due to the HIV infection in pregnancy? Although only fragmentary evidences and data are available to flesh out our hypotheses, immunologic factors during pregnancy, the changed hormonal milieu in pregnancy, viral factors, as well as other factors like the nutritional status have been thought to play a role. As we all know, pregnancy is a state of immunosuppression where the adaptive immune response is weakened with a Th2 bias. Also, there are inadequate triggers for innate immune response, all of which result in impaired pathogen clearance. Similarly, greater immune injury may be the result of higher levels of cytokines seen in these patients, as well as the increased activity of nuclear factor kappa B complex and other pathogenetic factors. The hormonal milieu in pregnancy, that is the very high levels of estrogens and progesterones and HCG, is also important because estrogens have been shown to promote viral replication, where already there's impaired clearance. The viral replication also is amplified. It also results in placental insufficiency and the poor fetal outcomes. Similarly, mutations in the progesterone receptor, the Progen's mutation, has been associated with fulminant failure, while reduction in the protective progesterone-induced binding factor may also play an important role. Viral factors are thought to be the most important. As we know, only genotype 1 and 2 cause severe disease in pregnancy, not genotypes 3 and 4. Multiple mutations have been associated with fulminant hepatic failure in various studies. However, the mechanisms by which they cause severe liver injury are yet to be fully elucidated. These are mutations in ORF1, 2, and 3. Some of them are shown here, and they result in blocking interferon activation, in increasing immune escape, increased apoptosis of hepatocytes, and increased survival of the virus within the hepatocytes, amongst other mechanisms. How do we manage hepatitis E infection during pregnancy? The standard drugs that have been used for chronic hepatitis E, as I will talk about, ribavirin and in some cases interferon, cannot be used in pregnancy, being category X and category C drugs associated with teratogenicity and mutagenicity. However, there have been arguments submitted that acute liver failure in the third trimester is a life-threatening illness for the mother at a stage of pregnancy when organogenesis is complete. And so ribavirin may be tried, but the first human reports of ribavirin during pregnancy are still awaited. Others have argued that in an explosive illness like fulminant hepatic failure, which often runs its course in 5 to 7 days, there may not be enough time for antiviral therapy to act. Once liver failure develops, ICU care with conservative management, prioritizing saving the mother's life, is the theme of management. As I have said earlier, no data support the hypothesis that termination of pregnancy alters outcome of HEV-ALF, unlike AFLP and other pregnancy-associated disorders. There have been case reports of successful liver transplantation for HEV genotype 1 fulminant hepatic failure, mainly from Japan and some from the US. However, prevention during pregnancy, vaccines have not been tested during pregnancy, although currently, as I'll come to later, phase 4 study in childbearing age women is ongoing in Bangladesh. Now, chronic hepatitis E virus infection, how does one define it? It refers to persistent viremia or fecal excretion lasting for more than 3 months following acute infection. It was first reported in immunosuppressed organ transplant recipients, liver and kidney transplants. and is almost entirely to genotype 3, never due to genotype 1 or 2, also seen with HIV infection, stem cell transplant recipients, rheumatologic and hematologic conditions. And it has been seen that up to 20 to 50% of acute HIV infection in liver transplant recipients become chronic. Presentation is often asymptomatic with mild LFT derangements. The virus is usually reliably detected only by nucleoside amplification testing, not by serology. And progressive fibrosis, cirrhosis, and decompensation within 5 years, if untreated, is often the outcome of chronic hepatitis E virus infection. There is no FDA or EMA approved therapy for chronic infection. Nevertheless, the EASL guidelines published recently have supported reduction in immunosuppression, which may result in clearance in up to 1/4 of chronic hepatitis E virus infection. Monotherapy with ribavirin 600 milligrams daily for 3 months may result in sustained virologic response in up to 78% patients. A second course clears some more patients when given for 6 months, but in 5 to 15% patients, there is a failure to clear HEV with ribavirin, and this may be related in some cases due to presence of a variant HEV polymerase mutation as shown here. Adding interferon to ribavirin is also more effective, but cannot usually be used in transplant recipients, except in some patients with liver transplant, who have had liver transplant. Sofosbuvir has been shown to have antiviral activity, but it reduces viral load and does not achieve a sustained virologic response in the small studies carried out till date. Newer drugs like interferon lambda, PPMO, HP1, 2-CMG, etc. are being developed and are being investigated for chronic hepatitis E, while indigenous medicines with anti-HEV activity like silvestrol and babaudan need to be explored further. A brief word about extrahepatic manifestations, mainly seen with genotype 3. Neurologic symptoms are common: central and peripheral nervous system involvement, including neuralgic amyotrophy, a unique, very commonly seen in HEV3. Pancreas, renal and biliary tree involvement, hematologic and heart-related complications and other miscellaneous complications, extrahepatic manifestations have also been reported, while genotype 1 is commonly associated with acute pancreatitis, including a small series we've reported from our center also. Now, coming to the last leg, hepatitis E vaccination, where are we today? The first study is all you're familiar with, the seminal study that appeared in NEJM in 2007. A vaccine developed by GSK using recombinant baculovirus containing P495 segment of ORF2 from genotype 1 was studied in Nepalese soldiers and showed to have a high efficacy. Another phase 3 trial using the P239 sequence base pairs from genotype 1 ORF and genotype 1 ORF2 was studied in China in the largest human trial carried out till date, which included roughly 50% who already were seropositive for anti-HEV. 3 doses of 30 micrograms were administered, and at 12 months, 100% efficacy was demonstrated. More recently, a phase 1 randomized open clinical trial using P179 sequence from ORF2 derived from genotype 4, which is seen to assemble in virus-like proteins, is being studied and compared against the P239 vaccine. So as I've shown, all these vaccines are directed against the ORF2, which has 660 base pairs, of which 495, 239, and 179 all include the E2 segment, which is the most highly immunogenic of the sequences seen of the ORF2. The status of these vaccines is shown here. Only one, the Innovax or Hecolin, has reached been approved in China and has reached the stage of phase 4 studies. Why is this? What are the limitations of hepatitis E vaccination today? The gaps in our knowledge and vaccination strategy were outlined by the strategic advisory group of experts from WHO, who found that safety and efficacy data were lacking in key populations: children, elderly, pregnant women who have very severe disease, those with liver disease who develop acute and chronic failure very commonly, in immunosuppressed patients, and travelers to endemic areas. Further, there are no data on immunogenicity when it is given with other vaccines or its efficacy in post-exposure situations during outbreaks. Other important questions about protective titer, duration of immunity, role of boosters, cross protection, efficacy of shorter schedules, and what is the best strategy, universal childhood immunization in endemic areas or selective vaccination for women in childbearing areas, are many of the unanswered questions, some of which have been addressed in the more recent studies. For example, this large Chinese study showed that the efficacy of this virus in patients already having a chronic hepatitis B virus infection was just as good as in the other healthy individuals with high antivirus titers. However, antibody persistence that was reported recently in 2019 showed that antibody levels did wane with time, with 1/4 of patients with either naturally acquired infection or following vaccination losing their antibody by 6.5 years, more so in those who had naturally acquired infection. Also, animal and human studies do show cross protection for both the Glaxo vaccine and the P239 vaccine. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, this large study has been initiated in China, in Bangladesh, in women of childbearing age. In this phase 4 study, over 40,000 childbearing women in the age of 16 to 39 years have been recruited, given 3 doses compared with the hepatitis B vaccination. And the primary endpoint is going to be HIV disease in non-pregnant women. While the recruitment is over, results of this trial are eagerly awaited. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that hepatitis E infection is a global problem with a heavy disease burden. It occurs in 2 forms, the genotype 1-2 and genotype 3-4 disease, which are both distinctive in their geographic, epidemiologic, and clinical pictures. Genotype 1 is the commonest cause of sporadic acute hepatitis, epidemics of acute hepatitis in the tropics, and is associated with high maternal mortality in pregnancy. Chronic hepatitis E occurs in 20 to 50% of immunosuppressed organ transplant recipients due to genotype 3, and which also has common extrahepatic manifestations. Treatment of chronic hepatitis B is mainly based on ribavirin, and other strategies are now being developed. Prevention with vaccines is possible, feasible, and has been studied in large populations. But until more data about specific target populations are available, its widespread use has not been recommended by bodies all over the world. And our understanding of pathogenetic mechanisms, development of diagnostic tools, and newer drugs and newer vaccines is progressing rapidly. I thank you very much for your attention.